Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mimi. We started a series about learning SQL 2 weeks ago, and we're going to be continuing that series. I want to tell you, if you think SQL is hard, or maybe you've tried it before and you got confused, the series is for you. We're going to be learning everything that you need to know to understand the basics, and then we're going to build on top of that. One thing I've known with my experience is that it takes you to have solid foundation to understand SQL. So we're going to be building on top of that slowly, and we'll get to advanced stuff later in the series. At the end of every video, there's going to be a homework. With SQL, you have to practice. When you run your query, even if you have any question, you can put it in the comment section, and I'm going to be happy to answer you. Stay tuned. Alright, let's get started. So our homework for last time said to write a SQL query that will return business entity, job title, and birth date. And before I forget, I would like to show that you can zoom your screen here. If you want, you can make it bigger by going thus, or you can go by making it smaller. Okay, let's write this query real quick. We remember that a query cannot run without a select and without from. And somebody asked, do you have to write your query in uppercase or lowercase? You don't have to write in uppercase. It's just I like it uppercase because it makes it looks better. Okay, so now we have a select and we have a from. We want to write this query. We said that we need to use this human resources table. You can either type it here or you can drag it from here. So I'm going to drag it. Somebody also asked if we need the square brackets. You don't need the square brackets. You can run your query without them. The only time that square brackets is required is if there's a space in your table name or your column name. So if there was a space in my table name here, then I have to have the square brackets. Okay, so let's finish this up. We said that we want the business entity ID, so I'm going to start typing business entity ID. I'll double click. I'll put a comma. You can come to the next line if you want to make it readable. And next we want the job title. I'll start typing job title. I'll put a comma. And then on the next line, I'm going to put the birth date, this one. So birth date, double click. And we have a query. I'm going to highlight and I'm going to click execute. And now we have the result. We have 290 rows returned. So if somebody was asking you for the result, you just click here, you right click and you say copy with headers. You open your Excel and you paste it in there. Next, let's understand what columns are and all fields. So I'm going to remove this and I'm going to do a star for now. I'm going to execute it. Okay, so all this ones, the business entity ID, the national ID, all of this at the top here, they are all the columns. So a table in SQL will have columns. So the salary flag, all of these are called columns. Sometimes they are called fields. So I'm going to type it here. So remember our single line formatting. So they are called columns, or sometimes they are referred to as fields. So if I were to ask you, how many columns do we have on this table? Then you just have to count this 1, 2, you count it all the way. Those are the columns. You can also get to the columns by going to the table you're interested in. So if this was the table we're interested in, we're going to look for the table here, right here. We can expand it and we can see columns right here. So if I expand this, I'll see all the columns in the table. So if somebody was asking you, can you pull me this? Then you can expand this and see if the column is there, if they were interested in the gender. Now you see that there's gender on that table. So that's how you can get to columns. Columns has data types, and I'm going to be dealing more about data types in another video. But for today, this is how you can get to columns on a table. Next, let's talk about distance. So let's just keep using this table. Right now, we already executed this and we have all this. Let's say somebody was asking me, okay, Mimi, can you tell me all the job titles that we currently have in our organization? Well, I can see there's a job title column here. I can come here. I don't want all the star. I can say job title, right? I can click it. And if I click execute, now we'll see job title. But we can see here that they are duplicate records. We see this, it's also here. We see to design. This is also to design. I don't want to have to copy this into Excel and have to do remove duplicates in Excel. You can do it also in SQL. And how do we do that? We use a keyword called distinct. So you say select whatever you want to select, then in the front here you just type distinct. Okay, before I run this, pay attention that before I run the distinct, we have 290 records. If I click execute now we have only 67. That means we've gotten rid of more than 200 records. So this is how we do distinct. You don't have to have just one column here. You can have multiple columns. So that means that you want SQL Server to look at distinct of all the columns that you have listed here. So if I want it, I can put as many that I want here. I can say gender. Then if I run this, I can see that we have female accountant. We also have male accountant. We have male account manager. So we have whatever you want here. Now we can see that the record has gone up. That's because we have both male and female gender. You can have multiple columns here. If I want it, I can put more columns here. And the distinct will just give you non-duplicated records based on the selection that you have made here. So it's important that you know what columns to put here. If you're just interested in the gender, then you can remove the job title, and this should give you all the gender. So right now we only have female and we only have male in this organization. Next, let's do aliasing.
Aliasing is just like when you meet someone and you say, oh, my name is Benjamin, but you can call me Ben. Aliasing is just like that. A column is called this, but you want to give it a different name. That is aliasing.
So I'm going to remove distinct. So let's do a star for now so that we can see everything. Okay, now we have everything. Aliasing in SQL is a way that we rename things. I know that somebody has created this table. I cannot go and say, okay, I don't want you to be job title. Let's change it to just title. The name is already set, but when you run your query, you can give it a different name. Okay, so let's use the things that we did for the homework. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it here. I'm going to remove this and put a comma. Okay, so if we run this, we only have this 3. But let's say I don't want to give this to my boss like business entity ID. I just want to call this an ID. Okay, so how do we do that? We have to say as. So aliasing in SQL, we use as. So we say as ID. So I'm going to put this on another line so that we can see them. Okay, so as in SQL just means I am giving you a new name. I know that this is your name, but I'm going to call you ID. Now, if we run this, pay attention that this is going to change now to ID. I'm going to execute this. Now we'll say, even though the name is business entity ID, I am giving it a new name. It doesn't have to be ID. Let's say it's employee ID. Okay, now I'm putting a space. Now we need that square bracket that I was talking about earlier. I'm going to put a square bracket here. Why did I need a square bracket? Because now I'm putting a space. Anytime you have a space, you have to have it. So I'm going to execute this. Now we'll say employee ID. But we know that the name is actually business entity ID. Anytime you rename a column in your query, then it's called aliasing. So you put as employee ID. Sometimes people will skip this as. If I remove this as and I run it, it will still work. But best practice is to put as. That way it's easier to read. So I'm going to put as back and you execute it, it's still fine. Let's also rename this job title. Right now there's no space. Let's put a space there. So I'm going to put as job title. And I'm going to execute it. Now we see that there's a space. Let's do the same for birth date. I'm going to say as, and I'll put, sometimes people will say DOB, date of birth. Now this one is just one word. We don't need a square bracket. If you want, you can remove it. So now we can execute. Now we'll see DOB. Other times people will use, instead of square brackets, sometimes people will use this quotes and this quotes. It's going to give us the same thing. Now if I execute this, I still have job title. So you just have to pick your preference. Do you want to use square brackets, or do you want to use this quote when you have a space in your column name, or when you want to use like let's say I wanted to use a dash. So for some reason my column name has a dash. If I remove those quotes and I try to run this, I'm going to get an error. That's why you need to use, is either you use this quote or you use that square bracket. So if I execute this should work fine. So that's aliasing in SQL. Okay, now let's talk about schema. I know last time we discussed a little bit about schemas, but I want to take the time to explain it because it's very important. So let's do commenting. So schemas. Schemas are a way in SQL that we do logical grouping. So let me expand tables here and show us. See here, if you notice, we see DBO dot. DBO is a schema. Human resources dot. Human resources is a schema. This is the actual table name. So anytime that you see a dot something before, like this person dot address, let me drag this here. I'm going to put this on a different line. Person that you see here, it's a schema, while the address is the name of the table. So when somebody asks you, oh, go look for a table in the schema, you just look for the schema, but you don't, in real life, you might have a lot of tables. You don't want to be scrolling up and down. So how do you find things easily in SQL Server? If I was looking for address table, for example, I can put my cursor here. I'll right click. I'll go to filter. I'll go to filter settings. And here I can easily say name of the table contains. So somebody just tell me, oh, I think the table is something address. I can just put in address here in this box. I'm saying SQL Server, filter my tables to only tables that contains address. And when I click OK, see, now I only see a few things. Now it's easy for me to find tables. You can do it by the table name. Let me go back here. I'm going to go to filter. I'm going to go to remove filter. Let's remove filter so we can see everything. Now, let's say somebody said, okay, I think that table is in person schema. I can go back to table and right click, go to filter, filter settings. Now, they didn't give me the name, but they gave me the schema. So I can come here and say, okay, they told me the schema contains person. So I can just type in person and click OK. Now when this is filtered, you see we only see schema of person. Person.password. This is the name of the schema and this is the table name. Okay, let's practice how we create schema in SQL. So in SQL, to create a schema, you would say create schema and you give it a name. So let's do test, just to test it. This is how you create, and then you click execute. Now we see we have a schema. If I go back up here like we always do and just refresh this database real quick, I just right click and I expand my tables. I don't see test here anywhere. That's because it's a schema. I have not put any table in here. I know we've not done tables, so I'm just going to create something real quick. We're going to explain tables creation in detail. So we've created a schema. I'm going to comment this out and let me show us. If I don't want to do this manual commenting, I can click on this and this will comment this out for me. See, I clicked on this. If I want to uncomment this, I just click the second one. It's going to remove the comment. To comment it, I click this one. To uncomment, I click this one. Okay, let's comment this out. And I'm just going to create a table real quick. Create table. Let's call it testing. So create testing. I'm just going to do something ID hints. Just for now, I'm going to explain this in another video. Okay, now this testing table, if I go to the database and I refresh and I go to my tables, see, now we see testing. This is showing DBO dot. Anytime you create a table in SQL without specifying a schema, it's going to put it in this DBO schema. The DBO schema is the default schema. This is a common question on an interview. They ask you, what is the default schema? It's DBO. That's the default. You see here, when I created this testing table, I didn't say DBO. There's no DBO here. But when I did create, when I click execute, SQL Server automatically puts it in the schema. Okay, let me tell SQL Server that I don't want, let's create another table. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to put it here. I'm going to comment this out by clicking here. Now it's telling me that you cannot, if I try to create this table again, I'm going to get an error because I already have a testing table here. Okay, let's call this testing 2. If I run this again, it's going to put it in DBO schema, but I want it to put it in this test schema that we've created earlier. To do that, I'm going to put my cursor here and I'm going to say test dot. So this is saying that, okay, SQL Server, I already have this test schema. I just want you to put this table in the schema. So now when I execute this and I come up to this database and I refresh, now if I expand tables and I look for test, you remember we have to look for the schema first. If we don't want to scroll, let's use the thing that we already learned. I'm going to come here and go to filter. I'll go to schema. I'm looking for test schema. Test. I click OK. Now we can see, we see this test.testing. If I do a select top 10, it's going to be empty because we don't have anything in the table. Okay, let's close this out. And lastly, I want us to talk about, so that's how you create schema in SQL Server. Lastly, I want us to talk about some things in SQL which are very important. Okay, let me drag this. Let's look for a table. So I'm going to clear this filter, remove filter. Let's just take one of those tables for now, this shift table. Let's do a select. Let's do a select star from this table. If I execute this, this is fine. Sometimes in SQL, you see people will put the schema dot shift. You have to have the schema dot the name of the table. So I'm going to put the name of the database, AdventureWorks 2022 dot, and let's put a from. Okay, so I'm going to put this from here just so it's easier to read. Okay, sometimes you see I'm going to remove the square brackets. Remember, we already said we don't need square brackets unless there's a space. So I'm going to execute this. It's still fine. So if you run your query with the database name, that's fine. If you run it without it, that's fine. But you have to make sure that if you remove this, you have to make sure that you are in the right database. So if I were to remove this AdventureWorks and I change this database to a different database, let's use master. If I click execute, it's going to give me an error because this means that, okay, go to this database master and look for this table, this table in the schema. It's telling me that I don't see this table shift with the schema in this database. To solve this issue, it's either I change this to the database name or I put this back to what it was before by putting the database name here, AdventureWorks 2022. The schema name is Human Resources. Now if I run this, no error, and this is still showing master. This is because now SQL Server knows that, oh, you want me to go to this database, this schema, and look for this table. If we don't have this, and this is not showing the name of the database like we saw earlier, it's going to give us an error. So you have many options. Sometimes you have to run a query connecting to different databases, and you don't want to put a database name here, then that's fine. Then you have to tell SQL Server the name of the database that you want it to connect to. So this is saying that, so when you see this three naming convention here, this is the database name, dot, this is the schema, dot, this is the name of the table. So let's try another table. Let's say I wanted to go to department. So if I copy this select star and I paste it here, I'm just going to drag this department. So we already said if I run this, I'm going to get an error. See, it's already giving me this error, invalid object. That's because I have this master up here. If I were to change this to this, then this will be fine, because now it knows to go to the schema, this table, in this database. If this was not selected, if I choose a different database, then I'm going to get an error. So remember, you can either put the name of the database in front like this, or you select the name of the database here. So remember, this three-part naming just means that this is the database name, this is the database, this is the schema, and this is the table name. And remember that DBO is the default schema. In future video, we're going to go into table creation. So for our homework, I want us to write a SQL query. Let me write it here, and remember to comment your query. So we want to write a SQL query that will show all products that has been sold. I'm going to give us an int, and we're going to use this transaction history table. So let's do a quick select star. And now we already said I need to put this database name here. So I'm just going to highlight this because I don't want it to run this one up here. So we can see that we have all those product IDs. I won't write a SQL query that will show us unique product IDs. So now I'm getting like 113,000 plus records. I only want to see product ID in your query, and make sure to put comments in it so that it's easier for the next person, even you, to remember why you've written that. Also, let's look at this customer table here, this table. I'm going to do a select star real quick. Okay, let's write another SQL query that will show unique store. We want to know how many stores we have right now. Right now we see that some of them are duplicated. Let's write a SQL query that will show us the unique store IDs that we have. So we have two queries that we need to write. One to show unique product IDs from this table, and another one to show us unique store ID from this table. And we need to remember to put comments in our query.
If you're conversant with the news, you would know that artificial intelligence, which is AI, is going to be the next big thing in the future. And one skill that you need in that field is going to be data science. Well, how do you get into data science? You need Excel, SQL, Python, Power BI, or Tableau. And this channel is all about learning all of those things so that we can stay relevant in the future and we can still have our jobs to ourselves. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you have any questions or you have any concerns, please put them in the comment section below. Remember to like and subscribe to my channel. I will see you next time. Bye.